Hello everyone, it's Noah for GCSE, and in this video we are going to be going over everything you need to know for your AQA GCSE Geography Paper 3 on Friday. Now, although this is specific to 2023 exams in terms of when we're looking at Section A, for Section B it's still applicable for you guys in future years. So I would recommend you watch this video to the end because I'll be giving you my essay plan for the ultimate 9 marker, which might help you out. And also, we're almost there. We're almost at 1k subscribers. So can you help me get there? I'm so appreciative of all of you guys who have subscribed up to this point. And we're almost there. So just help me reach this milestone. Now, on with the video. So this is the overview of the paper. There's a section A and a section B. So with section A, it's called the issue evaluation. Now, obviously you can do this in any order you want, but just going through it chronologically with section A, this is about the pre-release booklet. So this is normally released a couple of weeks before your exams and is different for every year. For 2023, it's about the Cayman Islands, and you will be given this in your exam and you'll be asked questions which we'll look at later. And then for section B, this is about the fieldwork that you have done. So this will be based on the physical fieldwork you've done and the human geography fieldwork. So let's look at those all in depth now. Key thing though, although past papers up until 2022 say it's 1 hour long, this year you're going to sit it for 1 hour 15, and I'm assuming every other year beyond 2023 it will now be 1 hour and 15 minutes. Now, let's look at section A, the issue evaluation. So, you can see the background is a nice Caribbean environment because this is the Cayman Islands. So, this year you've been given a pre-release about the Cayman Islands and whether you should build the cruise port or not, looking at the overall effects on the environment, the economy of the Cayman Islands, the cruise ship industry, and all of those things. Now, most of the general questions you'll be able to answer. Since you're given the pre-release in the exam, you won't have to do too much memorizing. So this was one from previous years. So you can see it says, study figure 3 in the resource booklet. So it directs you to a part of the pre-release, and then it asks you to literally copy and paste information, maybe do a bit of inferring as well. Now, other questions might not necessarily direct you to a part of a source in the pre-release, but you're more than welcome to use all your information about that. Now, it's very vague for AQA paper 3 what you're required to do, but most people tend to do okay, so I think it's quite straightforward. Now, the 9 marker framework. So in section A, the end of it, it's always going to be the 9 marker, which is always going to be the problem that you're studying. So for 2023 exams, it will be, should the cruise port be built or not? Now here is my 9 marker framework. So I've put 2 points for and 2 points against, and I'm going to discuss that in a little bit more detail now. So key point here, you know the 9 marker beforehand and you can prepare for it. You can add more points to it. You don't necessarily have to memorize the evidence you're going to use because obviously you'll have the pre-release in the exam. So for the first one, I said tourism industry is pivotal to low-income countries' economy. So you can use the evidence given in figure 1. Tourism can account for over 20% of total income in low-income countries. So remember, when you're giving evidence, use quotation marks to show that it is evidence from the source, and also mention, is it from figure 1, figure 2, or figure 3? So that normally tends to mean, is it from the first page spread, the second page spread, or the third page spread? So that's the first point there, which suggests in favour of building the cruise port ship. The second point is exponential growth of the cruise industry, which will be beneficial to the Cayman's economy. So just expanding on this point, because of the exponential growth in cruise industry in modern day times, it would be really beneficial to the Cayman's economy to develop their cruise in order to maximise the profit from their sector. And they did this between 2009 and 2019, and it's proven successful. So in terms of the evidence you can give, again in figure 1 it says, reaching 30 million people in 2019, the Caribbean continues to be the most popular tourist destination with over a third of the cruise industry market. Now, I would say try and get your evidence from a range of the different figures, figure 1 to 3. Now, and that is the 4 points. you can put 3 for points and 3 against points. It doesn't necessarily matter. Although there's so much evidence in the pre-release book, you will definitely not struggle to find arguments. Now, for the against point, I've said cruise ships are not sustainable, in particular the sewage produced. So it actually says in figure 1, again, cruise ships in the Caribbean are estimated to produce more than 70,000 tonnes of wastewater per year. Now that is all of the domestic uses, and clearly from that being a credible source from the WWF, it just shows the negative impact of the cruise industry as a whole on the environment, and therefore an against point in why it should not be built, the port. And the second against point is how cruise tourists spend less money per day than long stay tourists. Now this is actually this can be evidenced in figure 1, 2 or 3, so any of the 3 figures. So you can just say how cruise passengers just have a low level of economic contribution, because as it says in the evidence, passengers from cruises will only visit for 1 day, whilst long stay tourists stay for an average of 8 days, which means there's more contribution to the local economy, whereas if it's just contribution to the cruises, which tend to be Western countries like the US and France and England, then it's not really contributing to the Cayman's economy. Now those are 2 really good points that can be expanded on. Of course you can put more points. I wouldn't suggest putting any more than 3 points for, 3 points against, because you do need to do the rest of the paper. But you are given an advantage here. You do know the 9 marker beforehand, so use that to the best of your ability. And I hope that this framework has helped you. Let's now move on to section B of the paper, which is all about your field work. So the first part is your physical field work. Now your physical field work just means whether you went to a beach or a coastline, or whether you looked at rivers, that will normally be your physical. Now here are the key points that you need to know about your fieldwork. I know in paper 3 it's really hard to keep track of what you've done and where you've been to. So here are just a list of bullet points of everything you need to know about the fieldwork that you did. So firstly, the location of your fieldwork and why was this chosen. So normally it's a strategic reason. For example, if you chose a coastal area, then perhaps you chose this specific location because you knew that this location was experiencing bad cases of erosion every year, or you perhaps knew that the geology of the rock meant that it was rapidly retreating, so it needed protection. The second point is, what was your hypothesis? So your hypothesis is the thing that you are investigating. So just continuing with that coastal idea, for example, is the erosional protection schemes successful? Has it been put in, or is the area in need of coastal protection or coastal management schemes? And that is what you're looking for. And then you will then look at your conclusion at the end, which should link to that, but I'll get to that in a second. Then the next point is, what potential risks were there in undertaking this fieldwork, and how did you minimize these? So they tend to be not very serious risks. So things like, again, with the coast, it could be storm waves, or say if you were looking at cliffs and the cliffs could collapse, or if you were looking at rivers and you fell into the river. Those are all examples of risks. And then how did you minimize these when you were undertaking the fieldwork? Perhaps with the cliff collapsing, you were told to stay away from the cliff edge. And in terms of not falling into rivers, you were told not to stay away and maintain a distance from the rivers at all times, and also perhaps it was guarded by adults as well. Now the next point is the data collection methods. So these are the different data collection methods that you did in order to prove or disprove your hypothesis. For example, if your hypothesis was looking at the effect of erosion in an area, perhaps you did things like measuring the beach, or perhaps you did something like asking surveys for random people in the public and seeing, are the erosional methods worth it? Are they worth spending money on each year to protect the coastline, and is it effective? Now, when you're looking at your data collection methods, on top of knowing what exactly you did, you also need to know the sampling strategy. So was it systematic, which means, for example, if you're measuring the beach at every 3 meters, were you collecting the data? Or was it random? For example, when you were going out doing surveys, did you randomly go and ask people? And then finally, with the data collection methods, you also need to know the strengths of each one and the weaknesses of each one. For example, as we just discussed the surveys, obviously the strengths is that these people have lived there, they have experienced it, and they possibly could be really insightful to a longer term piece of data, as opposed to just you travelling to the area and getting to an unknown area that you've never been to. But the disadvantages is that people could give wrong answers, they could just be unsure, and some questions could just confuse the residents as well. And also it depends on their prior experience with the geographical knowledge of that, or whatever you're asking them. So that's data collection methods. Now for data representation methods, it's a very, very similar thing. So again, you've got to look at your data representation. Did you use something like a bar chart? Did you use a histogram? Did you use cross sections? Whatever you used, that is your data representation. How did you choose to represent the data that you collected? Now, again with this, you have to look at the advantages, the disadvantages. So for advantages, you could say, is it a clear visual representation? Is it quantitative? For example, say if you were doing a survey and they were saying certain words for a question that wasn't multiple choice. That's not a possible weakness of that, is that it's not quantitative, but it is qualitative. And also you could look at improvements. For example, next time you could look at a map to see which areas will be more busy, just in case you didn't get to ask many people in the survey. And finally, for data presentation methods or data representation, you need to interpret the data. And that brings us on to our next point, which is the results of the fieldwork. So what did these data representation methods show? Did it show variation? Did it show, for example, going back to that coasts idea, did it show that there was erosion in some areas and no erosion in others? And then finally, what was your final conclusion? So this is where you link it back to your hypothesis. So, for example, if your hypothesis is the coastal management schemes necessary, then your conclusion could be, yes, they are necessary because of blah, 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 all your data collection methods, or no, they're not necessary because of blah, blah, blah. Now, you should argue for or against, depending on how strong your data collection methods are and which way they sway you to. Do they suggest that it actually needs protection, or does it suggest that it doesn't? Okay, so now on to part A, which is the human part of the fieldwork. So again, you can see that the bullet points are exactly the same, so I won't have to go through them in as much detail. Now, for human fieldwork, this tends to be you going to a shopping centre or a sports centre or something with actual created by humans and looking at urban regeneration, for example. So some of you may have gone to Stratford to look at the urban regeneration there. So again, location of your fieldwork, and why was it suitable? So in case of human fieldwork, was it easily accessible? Was there good parking? Were you able to see differences in areas of urban deprivation versus areas of urban improvement and regeneration? Were you able to collect data? And that is what you would talk about in your location. And you also might want to embed some key facts about your location. For example, if you looked at Stratford or if you looked at a particular area in Liverpool, then try to embed some of your knowledge about that area and why that was a good location. For example, how there used to be the manufacturing industry, but then the areas became really deprived. And that's why it's a good area to show the differences in areas of urban regeneration and then urban deprivation. Then again, your hypothesis. So normally, most schools tend to do a hypothesis similarly along the lines of what is the inequalities in between areas of deprivation and areas of regeneration and how it affects their life. So again, potential risks in undertaking this. This could be injury due to traffic. Just think of more human injuries. So perhaps even the weather you could talk about. If it was really terrible stormy weather, then you could also say wearing layers of clothing, bringing waterproofs, and having designated areas to meet back. Also preventing getting lost as another risk, having meeting points and going around in groups. So now just moving on to data collection methods for the human fieldwork. So you could be looking at things like, how did you measure the quality of the environment? Did you take a survey did you go around and ask people? Did you do a crime and vandalism survey? Did you do a questionnaire? All of these different things, these would be the data collection methods. Now in the exam, they will only ask you to focus on one, sometimes even two, but mainly just one. So just focus on one of the techniques that you did. The strengths, the weaknesses. What sampling strategy was it? Was it qualitative? Was it quantitative? Was it fair? Was it just? Was it an equal representation? All of those things. And make sure, and don't feel afraid to mention some improvements that you could have done in your fieldwork, because that is what the examiners are looking for. They don't expect your fieldwork to be perfect. They want to see that you acknowledge there were some bits you could improve on. Now finally, onto data representation methods. So how did you choose to represent the data that you collected? For example, was your survey done in a bar chart? Did you do a dispersion diagram? Whatever method you did, they will only normally ask about one of them. And remember, you need to look at why was this chosen. So, for example, if you chose a bar chart, you could say it was easy to compare. If it was a comparative bar chart, it was easy to construct. It was very visual, and it was also it didn't allow for gradual differences. However, that was a disadvantage. But it's simple to draw, clear representation. You can see how differences change over space and all of these things. Okay, so that's data representation, and then the results of the fieldwork. So what results did you get from your data representation methods? And then finally, what was your final conclusion? And link this back to the hypothesis. Did you actually achieve your hypothesis? Did you work out what you stated at looking at in the beginning or not? And then assess how well you did that too as well. Okay. Best of luck, Year 11. I hope you found this video helpful. So we've gone over the Section A parts, which is issue evaluation in the pre-release. Unfortunately, I'm unable to show you the pre-release booklet online because of copyright issues, so I could only show you the information I've sent. But also the fieldwork, and I'm unable to give you any examples of fieldwork because it always dependent on which ones your school did. So hopefully you have some notes, or at least you can look back on the bullet points we've looked at to look at them. But again, best of luck, Year 11. I hope you found this video helpful, and please help me reach that 1K milestone. I'm so grateful for everyone who subscribed, and enjoy your exam.